So in this episode, we're going to talk to Duncan Kerr, who's the CEO of Aeristech. Aeristech were our first client. I've known Duncan for many years when we worked together at a VC. It's been really interesting to see his transition from investor in Aeristech to CEO of Aeristech. We're going to talk to him about that and all the capital that Aeristech has raised and the challenges associated with that.
Enabling Success for Founders and Entrepreneurial Businesses, hosted by Toby Harper.
Duncan, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me for this. So can we get started by you just telling us a bit about Aeristech and what the business does and your role?
Sure. Aeristech develops electric motors. They're very fast and power dense, and they're used mainly for centrifugal compressors. And those are used to boost internal combustion engines, hydrogen fuel cells, or industrial applications like wastewater treatment.
Yeah.
I'm the CEO.
Great. And can we set the scene to begin with? So can you tell us a bit about the amount of capital that Aeristech has raised, the different types and forms of capital that it's raised?
We've raised a total of around 17.7 million, 15.7 million of equity, and 2 million of debt.
Okay, great. And so quite uniquely, actually, your first contact with Aeristech was on the VC side, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you were working at Midven, that made its first investment in Aeristech.
Yeah, I was managing the early stage fund, and Aeristech was my first investment, I think. Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
First or second. That was in 2010.
Wow. So what was it at the time that convinced you that Aeristech was going to be a profitable investment?
I liked the technology. Emissions were already a problem at that stage, and it had the ability to reduce emissions and also to improve drivability of vehicles. Because initially it was decoupling a turbocharger, which suffers from turbo lag. That's at low engine speeds, there isn't enough exhaust gas to get the turbo going. So when cars accelerate, typically diesels, when you see them start out, you get this big belch of black smoke out the back. And that's because the turbo hasn't kicked in and it's not burning all the fuel properly.
So just as a side note, thinking back to your experience as a VC, which you did for many years, what is it that companies like Aeristech need to do, can do, should do when they're approaching professional investors to try and secure investment, to maximize their chances of success?
Well, they could always benefit from getting some almost professional help. Get somebody who's done it before to help them get the pitch right, get the business plan right. But for technology companies, it's best that they get some kind of endorsement, from customers are the best. But also, if they get some grants, then the investor knows that somebody who knows something about the technology actually
the IP
believes
has
in
actually been interrogated
Yes.
to some degree.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So I imagine you talked a bit about the original concept behind Aeristech and the purpose of the product that it developed relating to diesel engines. Obviously, the market has moved on. There's a move towards non-fossil fuel burning cars and that sort of thing. How's the sector changed and evolved, and what's the outlook for Aeristech like in that sort of change and evolution?
Well, the outlook for Aeristech has never been better than it is now. But it was really struggling around 3 years ago because I talked about a decoupled turbo. Well, the turbine side of it never justified being built. It's too expensive, doesn't recover enough energy. But electric supercharging did take off for petrol and diesel engines, but only to a limited extent. And then Dieselgate happened. And then the OEMs stopped all investment in internal combustion engines. And really, fortunately for us, that was when we started getting inquiries from hydrogen fuel cell makers. And our technology is ideally suited for fuel cells for a number of reasons.
How, presumably it has. How is that sort of the change in the evolution of the sort of the market that Aeristech was operating in, that it was targeting? How has that affected its ability to raise the various amounts of capital that it's needed to raise? Because it wouldn't have raised it all in the first check, would it, from Midvent?
No,
it's been through a whole
it's
variety of
been
different...
through 7-8 rounds of investment from various sources, business angels, crowdfunding platforms, venture capital funds, and most recently from 2 companies that are listed on AIM and from a subsidiary of SAIC, which is the biggest Chinese state-owned vehicle manufacturer.
Wow.
So various different sources over time, and COVID was quite a shock for us because at the time we had 2 offers from 2 Chinese companies to buy Aeristech, and they knew that they had to inject capital in as well. And we had offers in the December. They were due. We were in Beijing in January. They were due to fly out to do their final due diligence and check out the company, and then COVID happened. And the Chinese will not complete a deal without a face-to-face meeting and checking things out physically. So that died, and the Future Fund really came to our rescue.
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A very, very good friend of mine actually helped kick that off.
No, I was more than happy to help. More than happy to help. So, has the sort of the changes in the sector required you to reinvent the business along the way?
Well,
or is this sort of the concept, the primary purpose, the IP? Has it always been the same, or have you?
The core IP is the same. That's the controller architecture and the solid bar stator in our motors. That's been the same. But what we discovered is that Bryn, the founder's original concept was that you just do a bit of technology development and then a tier 1 licenses it from you and they turn it into a product. Well, it's turned out that doesn't happen. You virtually have to have it as a completely finished certified product before a tier 1 will license it.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're actually going through that process at the moment, developing a product for Cummins, which is our most powerful compressor yet. It's 45 kilowatts. And at the end of that development, which is part funded by Innovate UK, then we will start manufacturing them for Cummins, and then Cummins has the option to license it and manufacture them themselves. But that's after a 3-year development plan.
Yeah, and completely different capital requirements to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that project, the capital necessary for that is around £3 million. So these things, taking a concept through to a certified product in automotive is not a cheap process.
And presumably it's not possible simply from equity funding from investors, because is it too much of a gamble? Is that where Innovate UK comes in, where they're trying to stem a tide of change in the...
No, I think that, so an OE or a tier 1 in the past, so Cummins, for example, if they were going to develop a new diesel engine, they'd fund it themselves. But we're talking about hydrogen now, and the UK government, at least, is putting a lot of money into it. And companies as big as Cummins are taking advantage of that. They could easily fund a program of that size themselves. I mean, it's to a company that size, But they're all taking advantage of state aid. The same with our work with GK in aerospace. That's a £54 million project.
Wow.
That's how much it takes to get something into the air. And the government are funding half of that.
So this is the aerospace evolution of the product, isn't it? Yeah. And is the government deliberately backing hydrogen?
Yes. I mean, they published their hydrogen strategy a couple of weeks ago.
So are we all going to be driving hydrogen-powered cars in the future as opposed to electric cars? Or is it going to be a mix?
It's going to be a mix. There's a place for battery, definitely for short journeys, And so inner cities, people with cars who live in cities will mostly be battery electric. People who take large journeys will go to hydrogen because... the problem with a battery vehicle is the time it takes to charge it, hours and hours. Hydrogen, you can fill a car with hydrogen as fast as you can with petrol. So but the infrastructure is not there. You don't have hydrogen filling stations all over, so it's going to take time. And the first sectors that'll adopt hydrogen will be trucks, buses, delivery vans, where they're always going back to depot because you can have a hydrogen filling station at depot. And we've seen it already with Plug Power in the US with forklift. So Amazon warehouses and the like.
And Aeristech's in both markets, essentially, isn't it? So
we are, yeah. I mean, we're agnostic. Oh, you mean battery electric and hydrogen?
Yeah.
We're not yet in battery.
Okay.
There is currently an opportunity where we're evaluating with a big tier one that has a concept for cooling batteries, and they could use our compressors to compress the refrigerant.
I see.
But currently we're in hydrogen and we're in internal combustion. We're currently working with a Chinese OEM who wants to have a range extender that's boosted with an
Okay.
e-supercharger.
And cooling's all about improving the efficiency, isn't it? So it goes.
Well, the issue with battery electric vehicles is cooling the battery. I was told by this tier one that there are 7 different cooling heating systems on an I-Pace.
Really?
Yeah, throughout. Wow. And their idea is they could replace it with 2.
Yeah.
And that would be using our compressor. So if that comes off, that will be fantastic because then we'll be in battery electric, we'll be in hydrogen, and we'll be in internal combustion engine.
Yeah. So what's happened since the Future fundraise?
Well, the Future fundraise was substantial, but around 700,000. But that's not enough for a company like Aeristech and the amount of cash it consumes.
Yeah.
So we were in fundraising mode, and we were on our knees towards August last year. Yeah.
Really?
And because an engineering firm has always been difficult to raise money. Most of the investors in the UK are interested in internet and apps. Engineering costs a lot of money. It's people heavy. It's capital heavy. Most investors hate it. But we were very fortunate in that there was a massive hype that came out in the hydrogen market towards the end of last year. And so we managed to secure $1 million from an individual who runs an asset management company. And then we had some help from Peterhouse, which is a broker. And we got some momentum going. That's when we got investment from the subsidiary of SAIC.
Right, okay. Yeah.
We raised a total of 5.4 million.
Really?
Yeah. And
on the tide of the hydrogen hype.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Our deck was all about hydrogen.
Yeah.
But we also got it on the back of winning 3 government grants that were worth in total £7.4 million. The GKN one was Zero Avia, which is a startup aviation company, and the Cummins.
And what about, is that the same in other parts of the world? Are there other parts of the world that you're aware of where engineering businesses are?
Well, I think the United States is very different, where people do invest in both. It's just such a massively bigger investment pool. And of course, China. China loves manufacturing. It's almost the opposite. They all want to build factories, and the local government wants to put money into building factories and making stuff. So it's the opposite in China. But I mean, you've seen Tesla. Tesla's been able to raise masses of capital, and I've never understood it personally.
So successfully raising, as Aeristech has, large amounts of capital in the context of ever-changing markets, ever-changing technology, ever-changing competition is not easy, right? So what sort of advice would you give to somebody who's just setting out on the journey that Aeristech did in 2010 when you made the investment in it?
Don't tie your business to a single source of capital. Don't give exclusivity to anybody. Nobody knows all of the investors in the world. Keep yourself open to all different routes to investment. and keep looking for new ones all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's a full-time job.
Investment goes around in fads. There's 1 week people like something, the next week they like. So now they like hydrogen, whereas a couple of years ago they couldn't give a damn about hydrogen.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say don't do it then.
No.
That makes sense. So looking forward, can you tell us where you sort of see Aeristech's future in terms of securing any additional capital it needs, or what's on the cards?
We've got around 680,000 shares left from the last round, so we're looking to place that right now. And we've got some interest from some institutions, and we hope to close that within a month or two. And then we've gone to shareholders to ask them for authorization for another 4 million shares, which we want to. We've appointed FinCap, who are going to help us go to all of the venture capital trusts and the EIS funds, because they say they've got excess capital and no good companies to put it in. So. Yeah.
And what about, we've been talking about an IPO or a potential IPO, haven't we? At some point, is that still on the cards? And
I mean, it is on the cards. I mean, we're looking at everything. The UK market is quite sort of traditional, quite conservative, put it that way.
Yeah.
They like to back businesses that have recurring revenue, sign contracts for many, for many years. We're not at that stage, so that's why FinCap are trying the VCT first, and then maybe a year down the road we'll be looking to IPO. We're also looking at SPACs, but we're only looking at them.
Yeah. Out of America, or
yeah. To the irritation of our shareholders. So. There's no plans there, but you have to keep your eye open to everything. And there've been some racy deals there.
There have been, haven't there?
Yeah. Arrival, and recently there's this Joby Aviation. They've got 1 or 2 planes and they're worth $7 billion.
It's crazy, isn't it? Crazy, absolutely crazy. So Duncan, finally, what's the main thing you do as the business leader of Aeristech that sort of contributes the most towards its success, do you think?
Help raising money.
Very in keeping with the topic of this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. But in management,
just out of interest, so how much of your time is made up as CEO of this business in securing funding?
Probably half.
Wow.
Half.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, going to management meetings, asking questions, always asking if we could do things differently, never getting blinkered in the way you do things.
Yeah. Great. Well, look, Duncan, thanks.
I could ask you the same thing.
I've already had my interview. Duncan, thanks very much for joining us for this. Really appreciate your insights.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and informative. Please follow us, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.